Hi everyone, this is Alan Rosinski of Metro Manhattan Office Space. Good afternoon. Earlier this month, the New York Times published an article about soaring vacancy rates in New York City's commercial office space market. According to the New York Times, the vacancy rate in New York City is the highest it's ever been at 19%. This is indeed the case and has occurred as businesses have chosen not to renew their leases and have embraced remote work. As time goes by, this looks as if it was going to be an obstacle to New York City's recovery. While some companies are asking their employees to return to the office, vacancy rates continue to increase. Vacancy rates, which are officially 18.7%, have increased by about 15% since the end of 2020, and this rate is about double what it was before the pandemic. Even as the pandemic recedes, employers are offering their staff greater flexibility to work from home, and they just don't need as much office space as they did previously. As a result, companies are not renewing their leases as they expire, or they're subleasing space that they no longer need. Some neighborhoods have been hit particularly hard, such as downtown Manhattan, where the vacancy rate is about 21%. In certain respects, the situation is similar to the 1970s, and that took about 30 years for the market to recover completely. Before the pandemic, New York City attracted about 1.6 million commuters every day, and the commuters supported shops, restaurants, and theaters. Many of those commuters may not be coming back. They may be permanently gone. They're going to be putting at risk the businesses they supported. The commercial real estate sector is also under enormous pressure. Landlords, to attract tenants, now have to offer incentives, while the rent they collect is significantly less than it was before the pandemic. New York City raises 41% of its tax revenue from commercial real estate taxes. Reduced property values jeopardize that income, so the City of New York could be forced to cut essential services, and that could cause a downward spiral. The situation in New York City could deteriorate further before it starts to improve. 1/3 of all commercial leases are set to expire within the next 3 years. Unless a large percentage of employees return to the office, businesses will take smaller space or may not renew their leases at all. So in the short term at least, it seems likely that New York City will be facing even higher commercial office space vacancy rates. The situation has not been this bad since the mid-1970s, when New York City was in the midst of a financial crisis, and enormous new office buildings, like the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center, were being built. 14 million square feet of new office space is under construction in New York City. When these properties hit the market, they could further depress prices. According to the New York Times article, just 12% of Manhattan's office workers had returned to their desks by May, and it is anticipated that 60% of office workers will go back by September. But this still indicates a significant drop in the occupancy of Manhattan office space. The article concluded that other cities have become more competitive due to the pandemic, that the whole remote work phenomena will require a fundamental shift in public policy towards focusing on the quality of life, favorable business climate, and affordability. That this is what's going to be necessary for the recovery of New York City. The New York Times has its progressive, liberal point of view and is not exactly unbiased. To get an inkling of what's in store, you need to read publications such as Crane's Business Weekly, the New York Post, and the Wall Street Journal to get varying points of view. As a commercial real estate broker doing business in New York City, I see that there's been activity from growing companies taking advantage of current market conditions to acquire space. In the last 3 months, I've completed leases with a UN-related NGO at One Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, a technology consulting firm that acquired 3,300 square feet at the Chrysler Building, a personal liability law firm that leased space at 171 Madison Avenue. These tenants have in common that they've seen consistent growth, needed additional space, and could now afford to acquire the space that they needed. It may sound counterintuitive, but today's real estate market is significantly easier for tenants to navigate. First of all, there's a much greater inventory of space to choose from. Second of all, prices are considerably lower than they were 2 years ago. And third of all, landlords are willing to offer more valuable concessions than they were in the past. So my guess is a component of the recovery is going to be startups and successful small to mid-sized companies taking advantage of the situation to acquire commercial space. As a native New Yorker, I'm confident that New York City will eventually bounce back and be a better place to live and work. But the question is when? Is this going to be like the 1970s, where a full recovery took decades? Is it going to be like the 2001 terrorist attacks, where it took more than a decade to rebuild Lower Manhattan? Or will New York City recover within a half dozen years, as was the case following the 2009 financial crisis? I'd be curious to hear my subscribers' thoughts regarding New York City's prospects for recovery. Please feel free to leave your comments below. If you found this content interesting or helpful, I'd be happy if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can always find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @MetroManhattan. Until the next time.